Call to order. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the Republic of which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Members in the audience today. Seeing none, let's move on to item 3, regarding corrections to the agenda. Okay, seeing none, let's go to consent calendar. Any board member would like to pull something on the consent for discussion? I won't entertain a motion then. I'll move the consent calendar.
Okay. And that motion passes unanimously.
Very good. We have no items brought forward, so let's move to 6A. DORADO.
Good afternoon. I am here today to present the findings of the Water Year 22 annual report. This report is required to be submitted each year by April 1st to the Department of Water Resources as part of our compliance with our groundwater sustainability plan, or actually we have an alternative plan. We actually already submitted the report. It was uploaded last Friday, and so we are kind of coming to you after the fact for approval of the report. It has been posted on our website since last Friday for the public to review it. And so as part of the approval process today, we will begin with a public hearing to take any comments. At the beginning of that public hearing, we actually have Sachi Itagaki of Kennedy James on the line, and we'll do a short presentation for you to present those findings, and we can take any comments from the audience, and then you can consider the approval of the report.
Okay, so we need to open a public hearing.
Yes, please. All right. Sachi, are you out there?
I am out here in the ether. I'm just a voice. So, thanks, Julie, for the introduction. I guess we'll go ahead and go to the next slide, which is the agenda. So today, I'll give you a quick overview of the groundwater basin and a summary of the conditions for the water year 2022, which is the period from October 1st of 2021 to September 30th of 2022. That's a water year. And if time allows and interest allows, there's a little bit of information on the precipitation accumulation to date for this current water year of 2023. So with that, we can go to the next slide. So this is a map on the right of the Tahoe Valley South Subbasin. The subbasin itself is kind of a smaller area labeled Zone 10, but it is important to acknowledge kind of the bigger area, which includes the Zone 1 labeling, because of the contributions that this watershed makes to the groundwater basin. So that small area is roughly from about 6,200 to about 6,500 feet in elevation. And everything from 6,500 feet up to the ridge line is a part of the watershed and the tributary area to the groundwater basin. And these designations are also important because this is how the South Tahoe groundwater model is set up. So the mountain block, which is a Zone 1, is an area that is used in the calculation of groundwater recharge to the Zone 1, which is where, the district wells and the other pumping of the other users occurs as well. So, and then just by point of reference, Zone 10 is the actual delineation of the Tahoe Valley South Subbasin by the Department of Water Resources in their Bulletin 118, which is the groundwater series. So with that, next slide, please. So of great interest to everybody, of course, is precipitation. So I want to walk you through this graphic. The first thing is this is a station called Hagen's Meadow Station. It's located kind of due east of Myers, up near the ridge line. It's at about 7,700 feet, almost close to the ridge line. And what this graph represents is a long-term history of precipitation. The way that precipitation is measured at this particular station is a snow-tell station, which is actually measuring inches of snow water equivalent, which means that it's saying that, you know, if you took a column of this snow, how many inches of water would it represent? So that's why the scale is actually in inches of water, so it's different from a snowpack, kind of, you know, the feet that you've all been getting recently. So just that's one explanation. And then the color bands represent a range above normal. So the green band in the middle is what you might call a normal snow year, and that's based on the statistics of that station. And then as you go up in inches, and you go from, you know, above normal, wet, and very wet. And same thing as you go, you know, below the green bar, you go from, you know, below normal, dry, and very dry. And what the long-term history tells you is that there's a lot of ups and downs. But I want to focus our attention on the area to the far right, which is the years for 19, 20, 21, and 22, which is that 20 and 21 were either, you know, below normal or dry. They were right in that cusp, which is why they land just about in between those two color bands. But 2022 water year was actually normal. So, and that's good news, because as I show on the later slides, it shows that the basin responds pretty well. So with that, I think we can go to the next slide. So how does this look when you look at groundwater level? So the little graph to the map to the left shows you the 4 kind of continuous monitoring stations that this district gets data from. So at the very far south is the Henderson well location. It's an observation well down there in Christmas Valley. The Washoan well is, you know, in Myers. Martin well is closer into town, and the Lily well is fairly close to the lake. And so when you go to the graph to the right, it's the order of highest elevation. So the very top orange line is Henderson. The next one down the green line is Washoan, followed by Martin, and then Lily at the very bottom. And you'll see on the backdrop of that same precipitation band. So you'll see, though, that I guess the big takeaway for us was that when you look at the measured water levels, they're pretty stable over really a range of hydrologic conditions. So you'll see the ups and downs, you know, the squiggles in each of those lines, which represent kind of the annual change because of stress from pumping, but also just because of variability, right, between winter and summer for the seasons. And so, you know, you'll see that in, you know, what seems like drier years, it might go a little bit lower. And then in wetter years, it might pick up a little bit. So those are kind of the, you know, variability of the hydrology. So I think that's all good news, too, is that you're not seeing these big declines in water levels at these observation wells. And I think that will become clear when we go to the next slide. Actually, we'll go to pumpage, and the following slide looks at storage. So another, sorry?
Can I ask a quick question on the previous slide?
Sure. Yeah. On the groundwater levels, yeah.
Yeah, what was the cadence of measurement of the groundwater wells? Like how frequently, how big when you're measuring?
Oh, I believe these are continuously measured. So there's like a pressure transducer in there, so they go and download the data periodically. But yeah, so there's also stations where they do, I think, like a summer and a fall measurement as well. But these are 4 continuously measured sites.
Great, thank you.
Okay, if we're good to move on, and we have time for questions at the end as well, if anybody thinks of anything else or interrupt as you go. So this next slide represents the pumping from the larger community water systems in the basin. It starts from 2005 and goes to 2022. And what you'll see is you're not going to see Lakeside Park. There would be a little tiny little yellow line, but they don't pump very frequently because they're mostly on surface water from the lake. Lucas Brothers is the kind of the light blue little stack. Tahoe Keys is the little red. The district, which is about, I think, 90% of the pumping is the green, and then the purple line is the sum of all of the pumping that has occurred historically. A couple things to take away from this is that the Tahoe Valley South Subbasin, the groundwater basin, is estimated to have a sustainable yield of over 13,000 acre-feet per year. The average pumping is less than 7,500 acre-feet per year, and the most recent years we're down in the 6,000 acre-feet per year pumping. So you're well below the sustainable yield of the basin, which is actually also good news in terms of, and that's why you don't see the big water level fluctuations either. Is, it's all kind of how the basin responds to the recharge. So normal years recharge, helps the basin out, and you're also pumping much less than the basin could actually sustain. So one thing I will mention is that this average is kind of about 7,500 is a running average, and it's actually declined over time. And you might see that because I'll point out that 2013 for most areas was like a pretty big pumping year. Not as big as some of the historical pumping years, but even with some normal years and high precipitation years, the pumping has continued to stay below that big peak, which is a lot of the metering and the water conservation efforts and stuff is really stuck, and I think that's really helped with reducing the pumping, even though the population really hasn't changed that much. I know there was a little bit of a pickup maybe during COVID, but seems like it's moderated. So. With that, we'll go to the next slide, which is some of the similar backdrop, the precipitation with the bars, and then the blue line is actually the groundwater pumping that we showed in the previous slide. And then these are all results from that groundwater model, because storage is a very difficult thing to estimate without a model. And so what you're seeing is the variation year to year is the dark orange line of the estimates of groundwater storage, which is, a yearly number, and that varies, right? You'll see that groundwater storage tends to go up on an annual basis when there's more precipitation, and it goes down in the drier years. The orange line is actually the accumulation year over year, pluses and minuses that get added up, and you end up with a cumulative line, which is the orange line. And I think, the takeaway here is that the model groundwater storage does respond. It increases with normal precipitation, as you might see, and that's a consequence of that increased recharge, not only over the smaller area, which is the basin itself, but over that entire mountaintop recharge area. So, this shows that, the basin responds well, you get good precip, the basin recovers, but you're well under kind of the yield of the basin. So with that, we can go to the next slide. Talk a little bit about water quality. I know that's a big concern for everybody because the water quality of the groundwater in the lake is always so amazing. So this map on the right actually represents data that were collected by the regional board in 2019 and 2020. It was a pretty extensive data collection effort to try to map the PCE concentrations. So what you'll see is that the orange is the blue is the most dilute PCE. It's like, 50 micrograms per liter and less, while the orange and the reddish concentrations are where the PCE concentrations are highest. And those aren't a big surprise. However, what you're also seeing on this graphic is some of the sentinel wells that were drilled back in like the 1920 kind of time frame. And those are in the red and white kind of little circles. And those sentinel wells were monitored. They've been monitored every spring and fall for the last, I think, 2 or 3 years. And the most recent set of data for the water year 2022 showed a couple things. Not huge surprises. The Tahoe Keys Well 1 sentinel well, which is up near the Tahoe Keys Well 1, up to the upper right, showed actually an increase from last year, the last water year, from about 99 parts per billion or micrograms per liter to about 120. So it does show that those are increasing, and the purpose of the sentinel wells is to give a heads up to whether there are, concentrations that could be problematic. So that's something definitely for Tahoe Keys, as they look at well 1, to be monitoring. I know they've had some lower level hits in that Tahoe well 1, and the Sentinel well, numbers are increasing a little bit. So this is definitely something we'll be sharing to the Stakeholders Advisory Group, which is represented by in Tahoe Keys. The other values didn't change on the Tahoe Keys well 2 Sentinel well or the Lucas Brother 1 Sentinel well. The Lucas Brother 5 Sentinel well, which was the well that they recently put the PCE treatment on, actually also showed a bit of an increase from 130 to 160 parts per billion over the last year. So there's, I know, one more sampling that the regional board will be doing of the Sentinel wells in April, so that'll be an interesting, point to see how that's changed over time. Some other activities related to groundwater quality, the Lahontan Regional Water Board did do some soil gas sampling in the last water year. Excuse me. And I think the main conclusion was there were pockets of kind of this PCE vapor in the soils. The recommendation is to do some more sampling to see what kind of impact it might have on buildings and such in kind of those shallow soils. When we turn to things that are naturally occurring contaminants, including arsenic and uranium, both are still present. I know there's at least one district well that has arsenic treatment on it. And then the uranium and gross alpha activity, which again is naturally occurring. I know that in the last water year, Tahoe Keys put uranium treatment on exchange vessels there for both the Tahoe Keys well 2 and 3. So that's how they're managing to deliver some supply from both of those wells. And then with that, we'll move on to just some basic overview of accomplishments in the last water year related to this annual report and the groundwater program. There was the annual report that was submitted. That was for the water year 2021. There's continuous groundwater elevation monitoring that was, conducted and then reported to both the CASGEM sites, and that's transitioning to a SIGMA, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act portal. Continued collaboration with the Stakeholders Advisory Group. The alternative plan, which you adopted last year, was submitted in April. And then continued kind of public outreach, right, through the groundwater webpage where this information gets posted, meeting presentations to the board as well as to the SAG. And then, we'll be, when we look at the next slide, which is the proposed actions for water year 2023, ongoing activities related to groundwater, the regulation, making sure that the best management practices for groundwater are being adhered to, monitoring, we've already mentioned, right, particularly the water levels and the supplies and pumping, update and maintenance to the groundwater model as new information comes in. Continued collaboration with the El Dorado Water Agency as well as the SAG, public outreach, and then another reporting that is kind of connected to this is the annual water supply and demand assessment. That's under preparation now. And then some new activities in water year 2023 was to apply for the round 2 SIGMA grant funding, which we completed in December of last year. So that grant's been submitted, and fingers crossed they'll be announcing kind of preliminary awards in June. And then another focus point of the alternative plan and of kind of DWR's interest is shallow groundwater monitoring. And those are to look at what they call interconnected surface water, so where groundwater and surface water, kind of play together in that zone, or groundwater-dependent ecosystems. I guess, up there you might call them stream environment zones. So it's in those areas whether, to make sure that pumping by anybody isn't impacting those ecological resources. And then finally, there's a number of other actions adopted in the alternative plan that are kind of on the radar screen for activity. So I think that is kind of the main part of the presentation. And Julie, I guess we can open it up for either any public comments or questions.
Very good. Thanks, Coffee.
Any public questions or comments? So should we close the hearing before the board takes action, or take action within the open hearing? Any questions? Second instructions.
I suggest, if there's any discussion by the board, have that an open session, and then when that discussion is complete, then you can close it and move for any action.
Any questions?
Can we go back to the degrading groundwater quality map? I just was curious, it seems like, some of the hot spots, are related to areas, or kind of source areas where the contamination occurred in and around the Y, but the one that's up in, I guess, the northeast of that zone, it seems like there's a hot spot there. Is there any, known source contaminants going on there, any kind of?
Oh, you're talking about the kind of chartreuse and orange little cluster on the top right of your graphic?
Yeah. So, what do you know about the particular locations here?
Do you know, Saji?
I don't know. I know that the regional board did issue some proposed cleanup and abatement orders, but I think those were more down by the Y. So I'd have to dig into it a little bit to see, whether that was a pickup from some other sources, potentially. But that hasn't been a big point on their radar screen. So, we can certainly reach out to the board and see what they think about that too. But that's a good catch.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything on reports from the regional board other than 3 sites now around the Y, which is Lake Tahoe Laundry Works, Big Oak Tires, Enormous Lawn sites.
Right. Yep.
I do not recall the regional board looking at anything in that area. So at least I've seen over the last 3 years.
Which is kind of right in the middle of the State Street neighborhood, isn't it? Yeah. Kind of an outlier.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then I guess I have another question on the grant that was applied for. Can you speak a little bit more about that? The two grant, the scope of the work that was proposed in there?
You want to take that, Saji?
I'm sorry, which slide was that?
It was about the Signet rescue grant application, just what did we apply for?
Oh, yeah. So, we had a number of the, recommended activities and alternatives plan, that went into that groundwater grant. Certainly there was some of that monitoring of the interconnected surface waters and GDEs. That was one topic. There was actually another topic, these are a lot of, kind of EVO's ideas that we tried to carry forward, was there's the Tucker Avenue Stormwater Basin, which is closer to the Y, and to, maybe do some investigation there to potentially remove some soil sources of PCE. There was continued monitoring of the Sentinel wells. As I mentioned, the regional board SCAP funding runs out in April. And so it seems that if you have a Sentinel well, it would be prudent to keep monitoring to see, if things change down gradient, especially for the wells, like Lucan's Brother 1, for example, which had not had any hits, or the Tahoe Keys well 3, similar, which hasn't had any PCE hits. So those are the kinds of things went into the grant. I guess, Julie, we could put a little summary together and provide that if that's of interest to the board.
I recall you talking to it. I just kind of spaced out on kind of the full nature of it.
Yeah.
Right.
It was a huge, nearly $2 million, right, in value, in that application, and, it is a 95% grant. So, if we were to be awarded the entire value of the grant, the local responsibility would only be $100,000. So, it's a pretty good, bang for the buck if they like the project you propose.
And do you know the timing on that? Like when we might know?
So we might know in June. I don't know what sort of implementation period is tied to the award. Do you know, Sachi?
I think we spread it out over about 3 years, but we had this very aspirational schedule, right? Because I said, well, assuming you start X, right? And I believe that it's a preliminary award list in June, and then it gets wrangled over a little bit, and I think they go final in maybe September, October timeframe, and then you get, time to negotiate the agreement and everything. So my guess is it probably really doesn't start till like 2024.
Yeah, and as far as the matches, we do have about $50,000 currently slated in our 10-year plan for some monitoring well work. But, so, you know, even that small amount of match is really already accounted for in our budget. So, it shouldn't serve to derail any of our, other capital improvements, assuming we have the staff resources to move forward.
So then just the nature of the granting, are they, capable of plucking out parts and pieces of the grant and moving those parts forward and maybe not moving other parts of it forward, or is it?
Yeah, it's not about nothing, is it, Sashi?
No, I mean, we broke it down into like 7 components. I'm just looking at it now. There's a grant administration component, the shallow groundwater monitoring we talked about, some surface water quality monitoring, which is looking at some of the stormwater basins, the PCE at Tucker Avenue, the Sentinel wells. There was also a component to try to help Wilkins Brothers as a disadvantaged community to pay for some of that PCE regen, right? Because they've got to swap out the granulated activated carbon, and then some public outreach and engagement. So I think, you know, we tried to create a menu of options so that they had to provide partial funding. You know, I think they would probably reach out to the district and say, okay, well, if you only had X, you know, which of these would you want to do, right? So that would be the time to make that decision.
And since the minimum package size that they were considering, the $1 million, we would anticipate that you know, half or more of the package that we put out there is likely to be taken into consideration. All right, any other questions?
Any other questions? Very good. With that, we'll close the hearing. And entertain the board motion. Julie, would you like to dissolve the commission?
I sure would. All right, I'm asking that the board approve the 2022 annual report and authorize submitting to the California Department of Water Resources.
I move to approve. Second. Any discussion? Roll call.
And that motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much, and thank you, buddy.
That,
And by the way, the stuff is still on the great presentation. Appreciate it. Let's go to item 6B. John, you got this.
I guess we're here to continue the emergency declaration. Trying to keep the board updated throughout the event, but we have some more details to bring forth today. And just kind of recap, our Emergency Operations Center, the EOC, has been open for about 3 weeks now. And Paul's been the director of the EOC for the last 2 weeks or so. So I'm going to sort of hand it over to him in a little bit here. So Paul will speak about the EOC. And then we're going to hear from Chris and Trevor about what's going on in the field. Back to Paul for some numbers, and then back to me for the board action. So, Paul?
Sure. Just real quick. So yeah, the EOC opened up immediately following the event. We had it operational daily, basically, for at least a week, and then we went to about an every other day meeting schedule. And the way it's set up is there's different individuals that fulfill different roles. There's division chiefs for various sections, and for this event, by far the most active sections or divisions have been operations, and then Julie in the planning division. They've been giving the most lengthy reports, whereas another division, like staffing and safety officer, really didn't have much going on in this event, unlike during fire. That was very popular. They had a very important division because we had staff going 24/7. We were providing food and shelter and sleeping facilities for them. So yeah, 2 very different events. But we did meet today, and we actually decided to take next week off, let some additional work get done in the meadow as well as out of DVR, and then we're going to get back together on the 18th and kind of go forward from there and see at that point if we still want to keep the EOC open or shut it down at that point.
So good, okay. Chris, you want to come up and, sure, tell us what's going on up there? Good afternoon. Don't see
Good afternoon again. Wanted to just give you kind of a quick rundown. One of our biggest things here is Bellevue Pump Station, which I'm sure we've been talked about or heard about. And this thing looks like it's on automatic slide.
Oh, goodness. You should have override.
Well, start with this one. This is the pump station before, as you can see, the wood around the building. How do you stuff this? This is what happens when you harass IT.
I can show you and tell me where we're going.
Okay. Well, on this first picture here, this is Bellevue Pump Station. The excavator is actually at the back of the building, where this one, the road comes down right to the building itself and dead ends into the meadow. That excavator has tracks roughly about 2 feet tall. The bottom of the cab, I'd say altogether is probably 2.5, 3 feet to the bottom of the cab of that excavator. So that gives you an idea of the slushy water that we found that first Saturday morning when all this began. The wood boards you see around it, I contacted Hain Construction to come out and help us. That's actually his excavator. But the main purpose was to get some kind of barrier around Bellevue Station. We had water going into it. It was real concerning because if we lose that station, the 2 pumps that are in there, we're in big trouble. We're spilling in the meadow. I could go to the next one. There. That there is the front of the station. That door on the right is the generator building. Has a generator in it. The board on the left and the entrance there is into the pump station. We put down all those sandbags, and you can see the water level on the right by that pump, which was roughly about 8, 10 inches deep. That was going through the generator building. And we had about 6, 8 inches inside of the station at the time, too. So the wood was put around, they put a bunch of sandbags around it, trying to eliminate the flow of water coming in. We had 3 electric pumps going at one time, and we were keeping up after we had some barriers put up. But that kind of gives you an idea of what we were talking about all this time. I'm the type that likes to look at a picture, so hopefully this will help. There's the road, the end of the road, and the station on the right. That one is after we had opened up the meadow into the lake. So roughly where that wet spot is, closest to you on the screen there, is where the water was originally when we started. It had come up that far. So this is afterwards. So after opening it up, the water receded and made a big difference at the time. Back there, the concern that we had was that station has 2 pumps. Those 2 pumps were running full bore for a week, 2 weeks, right in there. And one of them started making noise. Sounded like a bearing was going bad on it. We lose one of those pumps, we could not keep up. So, Jeremy had contacted, Pat Machine, I believe it is, down in Carson or Reno. And we got it's basically a big pump, it's a Godwin type pump. And, that pump was capable of putting out more than what the station could put out with the two pumps, so we felt confident about getting that as extra. So there, you'll see that it's elevated on some concrete barriers because there was 3 foot of water, so we put it up above. There's a hose going into the manhole, which I think might be on the next one too. But that hose there comes around and goes inside of the building, down, and we connected to, where the pump is in there. It's the check valve, I believe it was, we connected to. So that way there, anything happens, we can pump out of the wet well, go directly into the station and into the force main. So it worked out pretty well. Luckily, knock on wood, we didn't have to try it, but we were set up and ready to go. That's just a kind of a back view from it. That's after the water was drained. That, again, was all 3 foot of water. There is where the pump, in the center there is the wet well, where one pipe's going down in, would come through the pump, and the previous screen is where the pipe came around and came into the station. There's where it goes into the door and into the station. That's kind of a far view, but what we did was, you saw the wood barriers, plywood barriers that we put in with sandbags. We needed something, or we felt that we needed something a little more permanent in there. So what we did was Hayne came in and he had sheet pilings, the fiberglass sheet piling. And what we did is we had them enclose 3 sides of our station there. So the water would stay out. It's right into the ground, probably about 2-3 feet deep. So we were good there, and that allowed us to pump out the water. And with that type of barrier, we weren't watertight, but we were a lot better than we were with just pieces of wood. The yellow that you see there is asphalt driveway, and we were going to put sheet pilings across there too, but they came up with an idea. Basically, those are like a small chunks of K-rail that interlock, and put a big heavy plastic underneath and behind it, so we could remove them. We didn't have to dig into the asphalt and still create a barrier for the spring runoff. So those slides are basically Bellevue. Right now, we're holding our own.
Maybe one thing at Bellevue before you go, I just want to give the board an idea of how flows vary over time with the station. They were as high as 2 million gallons per day at that station, and recently they're back down to like 80 gallons a gallon. So massive finite getting in that.
It was scary. I mean, yeah, you lose one pump, something happens, and we're done. Luckily, everybody worked together with us. We were able to punch a hole out in the lake. It was a natural runoff for the meadow. It had just sanded up over the years. So all we did was go in and take an excavator and remove the sand and their natural flow out of the meadow. Everybody worked together. It worked out very well. It drained the meadow substantially, which made a relief for us. And also, one thing I didn't mention is we had one manhole a few months prior to this, a couple months prior, that we had a smart cover alarm that went off in the meadow. And that smart cover alarm tells you when you have a high level in the manhole itself. And that went off, we went out and started looking and investigating. Long story short, we found a manhole where it was coming in between the cone. And it was 100 gallons a minute, if not more. And it was inundating our line. So we had gone out, and the sewer crew had spent some time sandbagging and putting plastic around it because there was 1.5 foot of water at that time. So we got it slowed down, almost stopped. And with all the I that appeared to be coming in during the storm, we had Robert Hayne go out and we put some of that sheet piling around that manhole just because we knew it was a problem manhole. So the plan is now, and we're working on it as we speak, is to have Hayne go out, and we'd like there's 10 to 14 manholes throughout that meadow around that station. What we'd like to do is get some of that sheet piling and drive around each manhole for now. That'll help if it does flood again, that these manholes aren't submerged in water. At one point, they were completely covered. So that's going to help protect that for the spring runoff, is what we're looking at.
just to say on that, I think, you know, the process you went through to solve that problem was just spectacular.
I'm sorry?
The process you guys went through to solve that issue was really spectacular.
It was a team effort, and it worked out really well.
And I think just as an aside, not only to our facility, but what you did for people flooding that meadow that were flooding as well, like you saved a lot of homes and a lot of damage to those houses as well.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it was really just all around a great job.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of people that deserve that credit.
Yeah.
There was one house, when we first found that one manhole, that meadow flooded so bad, he had about 1.5 foot of water throughout his whole house on the edge of the meadow. There's a new house being built out there, and it was right up, if not inside the new house, being built.
So I think your action saved that house in there.
We did, yeah. But the one that was flooded, we couldn't do anything, it was already ruined. But, like I said, LaHontan, CTC, Army Corps of Engineers, everybody really worked with us. It was sewer, you know, we didn't really have a choice, we had to do something. So it worked out well, and kudos to everybody that was involved, definitely. I'll touch on this one last picture real quick, kind of give you an update. That's a generator building out of Fall Lake Lake. That was taken yesterday. That was the avalanche zone. We weren't sending people in there up until a couple days ago because of the avalanche danger. But Liberty was in there working. Sanford Camp employees were in there clearing out snow, so we felt pretty safe of going in there. So we went in yesterday and took a look, and this is what our building is. On the right of that picture is a control panel. It has the switchgear, RTU, all the controls that we use, SCADA. What we did is we took a backhoe out there, pulled that roof off, and started pulling away at it. And it looks like at this point we're going to be able to, all the electrical seems to be in fine shape. So Stanford Camp, we've had a generator going out there, which I'm sure you're aware of, a temporary generator. We go out each day, fire it up, pump down. There's another station, number 3, that we're having to take the pump truck out each day, or every few days right now, and pump that out because there's no power. This station was our main source where we went from this station, which is called number 1, 2, and 3, and Stanford was number 2. It said from there that way. So we couldn't really just go to station 3 and start feeding back 480, not knowing what the wiring was inside here, if it shorts out or not. But we got it pretty much exposed yesterday. The guys were out there today. We took some dump trucks out. We're hauling out the debris. The generator looks like it's demolished. I mean, the radiator was pushed in. It looked like it maybe moved off its pedestal. I couldn't see the whole thing, but from what I could see, it looked pretty, I doubt it's repairable. But the problem is Stanford Camp, I found out this morning, and we thought there was going to be about 20 employees coming out this week. It turns out there's 45 coming in this weekend. Well, that portable generator works for Stanford Lodge. The number 3 station is, well, the sewage is going to go with those 45 employees' housing. And we're scrambling right now. I talked to our electrical department. We're seeing if we can rig up that portable generator at Station 2 at the lodge, bring it over to this, and rig it up somehow where we can run all 3 stations. At the end of the month, they say they're going to have a couple hundred people coming to the camp. So we're doing everything we can. I don't want to have to go in and tell them we can't do the sewage, you know, but 45 people, if we can't get this temporary generator hooked up in the next day or 2, we're going to have to use pump trucks, and I'm not sure how we're going to keep up or how many trips per day that's going to result in. So we're doing everything we can on that right now.
Yeah, just this generator serves Stanford Camp.
Well, it powers, that generator powers Station 1, 2, and 3. If the power goes out.
There's a few other.
Yeah, there's a
along there, but
yeah.
It's not these standards.
Yes. Well, when I say Station 2, it says 45 employees in the housing. I guess it's a bunch of little cabins off to the side of the lodge.
Like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we have the authority to declare non-operable?
I believe we do. I've never been involved with using that. I don't really want to go there. We're trying everything we can. But if we can't keep up, we're gonna have to ask to do something.
Yeah, I just, if I were them, I'd want a little bit of lead time. The someone came before, you can't cut them, well, that's too late.
Yeah. Dave Dunn is the guy who runs it out there. We've been in contact with him since this all started. And, I talked to him yesterday about, he knows what our issues are. He knows we're trying as much as we can. He called this morning and apologized that he didn't tell us it was going to be 45 people, so we didn't even know about that amount until this morning. So we are scrambling. We are trying to do our best to accommodate it, but he has been aware that we are having issues. He's aware that when the people come, that we were going to have trouble keeping up with the pumping.
One comment, if we can't provide the service, we probably should notify county health.
Oh, definitely.
County health would be the one to notify them that they can't habitate.
Yeah. With the 45 people, I think we can do the pump trucks. We have one pump truck that the pump department has. We have 2 cameras right now that we could also use. And I thought if I needed to, we could utilize like Alpine Septic or something to run loads. 45 people, we're not quite sure how many loads a day that's going to be. If they're working all day, a lot of them could just use the lodge part of it. If we do end up with the pumping trucks for the next few days, I was going to talk with Dave Bennett and see if they couldn't shower or use the restrooms in the lodge where we have the generator to try to cut down on the inflow of the sewage. Their dining room, all that is in the main lodge, so that also helps us too. And that's where the portable generator is. Is it ideal? No, I agree. Is it last minute? Yes. I know.
You could probably accommodate them, through extraordinary efforts and whatnot, but there's a risk to things like relying on trucks to go down that narrow road and staff gets sick, they don't, one truck's late, what happens, if we get an overflow because we allowed that crowd to gather.
I don't think it'll fill up that fast. We have a little bit of overtime. That's what we would be looking at if it did start. If we did have to go that route, we're definitely going to talk to them. Like I said, we're going to try to cut down on usage to that station that we have to pump. And if we find that it's, just overbearing and we can't keep up, we will not take any chances. And Dave knows that out there.
Like I said, I'm not going to speak for the whole board, but for me, I'm uncomfortable with the situation, and I think, notifying county health and getting them involved now in the discussion, but, on that operation, it's not like they're having a summer on the piece in China, there's probably, now, an ordinary event, that can be postponed or, moved elsewhere for this one time, it was a big avalanche.
So, and I guarantee we will do it. I'm just waiting right now for the electricians to go out and assess. Like I said, we just got the building open, assess what they think they can do. If they don't think they can do a temporary generator by tomorrow afternoon or something, our next suggestion was, like I said, try the trucks where we're going to let Dave know that there's a strong possibility we're shutting down. But we just like to make every effort we can before we shut down a business, but we're not taking major chances.
Just about the board members, what are your feelings on this thing?
I'm nervous too. Well, I guess my sense is that by, with the upcoming summer season,
No, the 45 people are just the employees. The event, the expected 100 or a couple hundred people aren't until the end of the month. These are just staff members that are coming in.
And the ones that birds are related.
Exactly, yes. Well, our plan was now we can cover a lot of the electronics. Our plan was, Liberty has power to the pole there, and we were gonna put in a temporary pole, use the boxes, the switch gear and that kind of stuff, and to get it fired up prior to everybody's arrival. And then we would keep that portable generator out there in case we lost power again to Liberty, that would still fire up, in the event that there was people already there.
Well, I'm just more comfortable at Liberty, we got a whole,
This power here, yeah, what we're trying to do with the 45 people is just buy a little bit of time to get that whole temporary power pole set up to run Liberty's power to it.
My question's more longer term, like, we're not gonna replace this location, right? Yeah, I'm sorry, any locations we will put it?
That's a good question. I asked Dave Brennan about that yesterday, the gentleman in charge out there. I would like to see it moved. Not really a whole lot of options where to move it. It was mentioned that we could possibly put it behind the lodge, out of the Avalanche Alley, and, we might possibly be able to do that, and see how that works, just rewire some of it, and do a little bit of underground wiring. But my first time is I'd like to move it, and I think everybody else is too.
I think people would pay for us to put it back in the same spot.
Yeah.
That's if we said, we can't do that.
They need to go somewhere else. They really are.
Let's not do a bad idea. You don't build something out of that challenge.
Yeah, this is not around the same page as well. Yeah.
It's the electrical building and the backup generator. Yeah.
I'm just curious if Stanford Camp itself has a backup generator, any cost share opportunity or consolidation?
You know, I think they have some kind of, they're out there year round, so I've never seen it, but I imagine they have some kind of small generator. But what our thought was like at the fire department out there, Palm Leaf, we asked if we could put a generator behind the building, the fire station, and they agreed, and what we did was we had them put in their own switchgear, so when the power went out, they could utilize our generator and have a bigger generator for powering up the station. We were kind of looking at the same kind of idea. You know, you let us put it over here, you know, put in a switchgear, and then when the power goes out, we'll have a generator that we can run all of our stuff, plus the whole lodge. So we have done that before, and that might be the selling option for us to be able to move that building.
So we talked about this already a couple of times, 2 or 3 times today. And we're in touch with the Stanford Camp daily. They know our challenges and our concerns. I think, Chris, you're wanting about a week to get electrical access, our ability to serve out there.
Yes, like I said, they get it cleared out today. They get all the rubble and the wreckage out today. It'll give us a better idea.
But, yeah, to the board's point, I think we, depending on how that turns out, need to make sure we communicate with Stanford Camp. We have limited abilities, we have other priorities. We'll do all we can, but there's a limit. And, I guess take it from there. We'll see what we find out.
And I think Dave will work with us. If he knows that we're going to have issues, like I said, utilizing the lodge more instead of the cabins for showers or whatever.
Staff, at least.
Yeah, it's just staff. But 45 people, you have every right to be concerned. 45 people is a lot. Don't think that we're not concerned. Yeah, we're going to, well, now, thanks to the message I got this morning, a lot of us are going to be losing sleep this weekend, so we're doing everything possible. And we are not afraid to pull the plug if there's any chance of snow.
That road is not really amenable to trucking in and out of our.
Actually, it's not bad. That's another thing about Stanford Camp. We used to pay a gentleman out there who lived there with his mom was old Craven. Everybody used to pitch in $5,000 to $8,000 and he would keep the road open for us during the winter. Well, his mom passed away and he was done, he moved away. So Stanford Camp has actually been doing a real good job of keeping the road open for us all winter long. And we send tractors in there once in a while to help, the bigger loaders to help open it up. But it is still icy in some spots. But the truck
The base road is flat, like the road, it is something on, you know, it's a little town going on.
Yeah.
It's just the road itself is, but then the practice is on it, it's flat.
today we have two full-size, dump trucks going that way, they're doing it without chains. So,
One other question on this, is the location, kind of the remoteness of it, does it make the solution to cost? It doesn't make the solution more challenging, does it make it more expensive to solve these challenges? Or is it just, I guess what I'm having is, this taking place at Sanford Camp versus, I don't know, Tahoe, is there additional cost, staff time, anything associated with like addressing the issue here compared to something more in town?
Probably just the location of it, getting in and out of it. The generator building itself isn't as big as some of our other buildings here in town. I don't know, I don't think there's much more cost out there.
A long time to get out there.
Yeah, it's just, I mean,
The focus is like no traffic out there right now, right? So it's like basically just us, right?
And the reason I'm asking is at the budget meeting, just before this, there were discussions about kind of the uniqueness of all of the costs associated with it. So I was just kind of seeing how this particular situation kind of fits in that overall, discussion point.
well, now, if you look at the overall system, now we can talk. Yeah, the overall building condition, we can sink a lot of money in there just to bring it back up to date, I would think. I mean, you know, we transferred everything over from vacuum station to electric now, which helped tremendously. We still have our issues with it, but it still helped tremendously. We've got a 4-inch force main that nobody's really ever seen the inside of it, except maybe if you do a tap on it at the main building. So we are working to try to get some ports in that maybe we can get a lateral camera or rent a camera, or there's different options of electronic balls that you can put in there to assess things. The overall part of it, yeah, it could use quite a bit of money invested in, I guess. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Anything else?
Thanks, Chris.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Gonna be Thursday up next. Tell us all about ADR. All right, I'll try to keep this quick and
I'm trying to forget it, I swear. Come on.
Take it by.
That means you only have two, Trevor.
Yeah. Trevor Quilisi, engineer. I'm here on behalf of Jason Blaze from the DVR operations station out today. So I wanted to give you a quick overview of DVR, just to give a few pictures just so you know what's going on up. It's a magical place that you rarely see. This is looking at Harbor Place Reservoir at about 58 feet in elevation. The overflow there that you see is 65, so you've got about 5 feet of space there. That's actually several hundred acre feet of storage remaining, so we've got a lot of capacity. We're seeing flows dropping off. We're releasing at about 5 CFS, so we're sending out a little over 3 million gallons a day, so pretty close to matching the plant flows. Here's an overview of Diamond Valley Ranch. So we're going to talk a little bit about Harvey Place operations today, Indian Creek Reservoir as well. And then up that line just popped up to the upper right corner is Diamond Ditch, which goes to our ranch recipients at Effluent Water. It also goes to what we call the on-farm, which is our emergency disposal location. And we're going to talk a little bit about Vessel Ditch, which is the catchment for the watershed that otherwise go to Harvey Place Reservoir. So that preserves the capacity in Harvey Place by intercepting that natural runoff and sending it to Indian Creek Reservoir. It's also the source for fresh water from the Carson River or from Indian Creek. So
So the first one I wanted to talk about is Diamond Ditch. This is the channel or canal that runs out of Harvey Place Reservoir to the ranches and the on farm. Over on the right is mid-March when we're removing snow from that facility in anticipation of potentially need to release from Harvey Place Reservoir, which we did end up doing, and we needed that ditch to be clear. So you see pretty substantial snow removal there. During the course of that operation, there were 3 locations that experienced concrete damage, similar to what you see here. What that means is we're able to flow water through it, but we're not able to bring it back up above where the damage occurred, so we're flowing about 5 CFS. We'd like to increase that to about 15. That'll let us draw down the reservoir faster and then hold that capacity for later in the season. White Rock Construction is currently working on these repairs, and we're getting Diamond Ditch scheduled. We're also working on some repairs on the on-farm system.
So I think those repairs will be done sometime next week.
And so the on-farm system, it's a series, I'll show some more photos, but it's a series of earthen ditches off of primary concrete canals. So you've got a main conveyance, and then each of those little fingers typically follows just a contour. So everyone referred to as like the 4990 lateral, and that's the ditch that's at an elevation of 4,900. We are exclusively responsible for the operation and maintenance of this. So this is upstream of the point of water delivery to the downstream recipients. And so we installed this in 1987 or 1988 through an agreement with the Dresser property that interest transferred to the Brooks. And so we're going to pay particular attention to this downhill channel, which is where we experienced some damage. But here's some photos of that facility. We have a number of monitoring wells that we access. You see some road work in the upper right. This is a typical concrete channel running through the property that would then go to one of these diversion boxes in the bottom right and be sent out into the channel. There is a lot of erosion issues, so both historic and current on these. We're primarily focused on the concrete channels that are needed for water delivery. So this is an example of where an earthen ditch overflowed and then undercut one of the concrete channels. That then followed underneath the channel, and you can see how the concrete bottom is dropped in the lower right, and we've got about 1,000 feet of that we're currently working on repairing. So again, we're working on road repairs, culvert repairs, and then also the concrete channel. The skid steer Bobcat on the bottom right, that's like a cement hopper that can mix in the field. And then we've got the funnel tree coming out the bottom, so we're making slurry on site to backfill those voids and systematically cut up walls and then filling in and repairing that. We're reusing as much of the ditch as we can. The Dressler ditch identified as intersecting flow, so it doesn't reach Harvey Place. And these are some examples of just the rough road conditions out there. We had to do a lot of snow removal through this winter to retain access. The photo on the lower left, that just beyond, next to the tracked utility vehicle, that's one of the flumes right before it goes to Union Creek Reservoir. This is where we experienced a blowout that went into Stevens Lake, and then that in turn flowed into Harvey Place, which impacted our capacity in Harvey Place. So there's a big focus on keeping this facility up and running to make sure those flows are going to Union Creek rather than Harvey Place. The photo on the right, I think there's about 4 disasters in this picture. You've got the fire, August flood event, December flood event, and Colorado storm. Here's not the Colorado storm. This is what's called the sandbox. This intercepts flow coming from the St. Lake drainage, and this has had recurring debris flows. This senior grants coordinator and I have a tour with FEMA Tahoe of this facility this Monday, and we're going to talk about possible projects to mitigate. We're looking at digging debris ponds, establishing an interceptor ditch, and potentially piping this section. So we're pursuing FEMA Tahoe mitigation funds to do that based off the August event. We're not even talking about the current event. But again, it's functioning, but there's major access road issues, also a lot of drainage issues with a lot of culverts from debris flows, which is compounded by burn wash. These are typical pictures from around the ranch.
Upper left next to the Polaris and track vehicle, that's of the quad culverts. We're having flows that are then going over roadways, impacting roads. On the upper right, that's the top of Harvey Channel. So that's an area that's shifted in very heavily. It needs to be cleaned out. It's going to take full on the ditches. Lower left, Harvey Channel again. You can see erosion around the pipe termination there. It's just a culvert crossing. And then the lower right again is an example of one of our torn up roads in the burned area. It's getting a lot of runoff from the mountainside. It's been subject to snow removal. It's in pretty rough shape. So again, we're meeting with Power OES to this facility, go over potential funding and mitigation measures, and trying to figure out, to terminate our work with fiber construction. Again, that's Harvey Place, and I'd welcome any questions. Again, we're pretty stable, we're functioning, we're not discharging at the level we'd like to be, but we're actively making repairs to get to that level. And I think we're identifying a lot of potential future issues, and we're going to have some follow-up meetings to revisit Diamond Valley Ranch and the master plan, strategic plan in the future. Any questions?
I guess for me, just part of maybe an ops committee meeting, I would be interested in having a more detailed conversation around master planning, DR, and some of your thoughts on what you guys are looking to do there. I'm very interested in maybe some natural solutions potentially that are available or not, or reforestation plans, things like that. Just so I'd like to get a better appreciation for how you guys are thinking.
And again, person, we're actively doing GIS mapping. We prioritize that, so I have that nice little graphic to show the outbound system. And a lot of this has been good because it's establishing, okay, where is our point of delivery? Where does our responsibility end? And I think that's it's enlightening what our historic practices may have been or may not have been in terms of where our responsibility, where our written responsibilities are versus maybe where our efforts have been going historically. So we're actively working on that, working with Jason and his staff to identify where these issues are, and then also actively mapping for GS folks.
Thanks, Trevor. I got a little update from kind of wastewater treatment plant side. I had mentioned before, a couple of weeks ago at the peak, we were seeing fills of over 13 million gallons per day of the treatment plant. So really anything more than 7.5 or 8 million gallons, we need to take the difference to the ERB. So we were treating and exporting and taking the excess to the ERB for almost for about a week. I think we had as much as about 8 million gallons in the ERB, and there's 54 million gallons stored in there, so it's only a room. But since we saw that 13, kind of slowly coming down, as we saw the improvements take place out there at Bellevue, we saw a big drop. And so today we're seeing flows in the low 4s during the week, and maybe the mid 4.5, plus or minus on the weekends. A little more than normal, but, we can definitely look at those numbers. And all of our storage has been empty. All the ERB has been brought back to the plant. So the ERB is available, and our ponds are empty out front here, and our equalization basins are empty out past here. So all storage is available, and plant flows are pretty close to normal. So with that, we'll go back to Paul and talk a little bit about the numbers. Last time we passed, we approved expenditures up to $20,000, and I think we're there.
Yes. Between contractor costs for silver white rock and hanging, combined with equipment rental, which some of the pumps and things are very expensive implementing, as well as some internal costs, without being completely refined, we know that we're bumping right up against the 300,000 was authorized. We would definitely highly recommend that we increase that or approve that same amount again, and then we can give hopefully a more defined report 2 weeks from now when we have received some of the invoicing.
Yeah, I just got a report that for AIM, we're probably looking at about $75,000 today, and White Rock, about 200,000, taking us to April 20th. So, And we need to bump that number up, I think, probably to, 600,000, just to make sure we got enough room. I think we should.
Remember I said the last board meeting?
Yeah. Yeah, we need more, and hopefully we'll be getting close, to ending that point. And again, we're expecting reimbursements of 75% from these types of events, so that helps a lot, but certainly more to be done in the future to minimize these impacts and future storm events. So that's all I think we have in terms of presentation today. If once there's further questions or comments, I'll read the request for board action.
Go for it.
All right. Request for action number 1, pursuant to Public Contract Code Section 21050C, continue the emergency action to respond to winter storms emergency pursuant to resolution number 3242-23. And number 2, approve expenditures necessary for emergency response not to exceed $600,000.
I make a motion.
Oh, second.
Any discussion?
I think it's probably, we'll see if it comes to fruition, but, if we get a big warm spell, if this emergency action, but it continue, I think we're gonna have some pretty significant amounts of potential, so, Ryan and I have more challenges to come.
Yeah, we're looking ahead, associate at the Meadow, at Bellevue, and working with Northwest Hydraulics and TPC, and looking at the snowpack and the weather looking forward, and we have some future actions that we're contemplating, but we're keeping an eye on it. Thanks.
Okay, come on in, call the question.
Yeah. You can't vote unless you have the presentation. And that motion passes unanimously.
Item 16, Megan Colby. How do you vote?
Good afternoon, Megan Colby, Senior Engineer, and I'm here to discuss the 2023 Flagpole 2 and Air 22 tanks for coating project. This project consists of doing interior coatings on both Flagpole 2 and Air 22, and then at Flagpole 2, it's also the exterior coating. We opened bids on March 14th. There were 5 bids received, and the amounts range from $396,750 to $576,900. Staff found irregularities in all 5 bids that were received. I know this is something that's been discussed before, but there's a big difference between in-material irregularities and ones that are material. The in-material irregularities may be waived by the board at its discretion, whereas material irregularities are generally the bidder an unfair competitive advantage or contain errors that would permit them to remove their bid, and so those are not able to be waived. So, those are our low apparent bidders, the low apparent bids from Quality Painting and Sandblasting, QPS. And then also the second apparent low bid from Process Measurement Group, doing business as Toledo Industrial Coatings, did not include original hard copy bid bonds at the time of bid opening, as required by the contract specifications. So it's been a long-standing requirement that the district require a valid original bid security that's provided at the time of bid opening. Opinion of district staff that if a valid bid security is not in hand, the bidder can have the opportunity to withdraw their bid, and that provides them a material advantage over the other bidders. So on Sunday, March 19th, we did receive a timely bid protest from the apparent low bidder, which is Quality Painting and Sandblasting. Their protest stated that the bid instructions are contradictory and confusing for submitting electronically as opposed to sending in physical hard copies of all bid forms. They did acknowledge that they had an oversight, or that they had an oversight of requiring the hard copy original bid bond in advance of the bid opening. So staff, we consulted with district legal counsel and we issued a response letter on Friday, March 24th, which was within the 7-day response period. And district legal counsel found the protest submitted by QPS to be meritless and that it should be rejected in its entirety. The district considers submission of a bid security pursuant to the terms of the bid documents to be a material requirement which cannot be waived under California law. So the third lowest bid was received from Flower Construction Corporation, doing business as Resource Development Company, RDC, and it only contained minor irregularities as listed in the attachment memorandum that was prepared by the purchasing agent. There's also a summary of all the bids received and the bid irregularities, word is a tongue twister, attached to the board agenda item. So before I read the recommended action, I'm just going to know if there are any questions.
So, did all the venue submit this bond electronic?
No, they did not submit any bid bond. No, or, I'm sorry,
I think they may have submitted it with the documents that they uploaded to plan to.
the board, or the memo that was prepared by the purchasing agent said that they did not submit a bid over a hard copy. It does not confirm whether one was submitted with their electronic document. That was something that we discussed with legal counsel because the second low bidder, did submit it electronically, but their bid bond was not received in time for the bid opening. It was delivered past the bid opening, which the requirement clearly states in bold letters by bid opening. So we discussed both of these with district legal counsel, and again, it's a material requirement that the hard copy has to be in our hands so that we can verify the seal on it, and that it is not waivable and it's jurisdictional by California law. I don't know if Gary has anything to add. We were discussing this with Mary Beth.
I didn't hear the results of your discussion there. Did they submit an electronic version at the time of the?
It's not in the memo. Okay.
We're not certain. I mean, they may have, but when we have received electronic only in the past, we have still rejected bids for not providing the hard copy, because the advice we have received is without that embossed hard copy, you don't actually have a security that you can rely on. Correct.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, in this, let's assume that they did submit an electronic. Is that hard copy worth $50,000 to us? Because that's basically what we're, by rejecting this bid and picking another contractor that's $50,000 more, we're saying that difference, that hard copy is worth $50,000.
And my perspective would be yes, because you actually have nothing, and you're setting a precedent for all future bids to make that same decision.
Well, what is the electronic inspection? I'm not getting that. I hear there's an embossed original somewhere, but is electronic inadmissible or unenforceable?
That's the advantage that we have to take. It needs to be hard.
Why do we have the electronic option? We're not going to accept it.
Well, I'm wondering why that's not in materials.
And I was going to say, like, the idea that like a physical copy, like, these people in this theoretical scenario we develop are going to go as far as to develop a counterfeit document and send it to us electronically. but that like people in this world do not, they wouldn't take it that far, would not have the ability to provide something physical for them as well, they're gonna be devious. It just, I don't know, it seems like a rule we've created, and it may be state law, to your point, but like the things I'm able to do electronically from my phone, I can refinance my house, right? So, maybe I'm not trying to question California law, but just the matter of hand, you're buying a lot with 50. I don't think you're getting a lot with $50,000.
So the only time I know that we have waived the requirement for the hard copy to be in hand was during COVID, when there was an issue of the delivery service being unreliable. And in that case, I believe we actually got certainty that they had shipped the hard copy.
Yeah, we have all the
the
tracking information in that situation.
So it wasn't a question of whether the hard copy was actually required, it was, could it be delivered?
Well, and it was, the argument at that time was, they could not have taken it back and withdrawn their bid.
Because it was in the
already on its way to us. And that's, I think, because of it, this argument, I think 2 weeks ago, maybe a month ago, when we rejected another bid, the argument is that they could withdraw their bid, had they made a mistake on their bid and the bid was too low, they could withdraw it without us being able to enforce the bid bond, because we don't have a valid enforceable bid bond. And to Nick's point, are they that devious? I don't know, but they could take more risk in their bid, knowing that they could potentially withdraw without a valid.
So we couldn't enforce an electronic version of a bid bond.
That is the advice that we've been given, that it may not be enforceable.
Yeah, so in our response letter, and this was the advice that was given to Julie and I from the district legal counsel, was that because without proper and enforceable bid security in place, a bidder is not functionally bound to honor the terms of their bid. Therefore, they enjoy a lower inherent risk if their bid turns out to be erroneous or far less than the second low bidder.
So, can we enforce an electronic bid bond?
I have never looked into that. I'm assuming that Mary Beth at BBK is certainly, she's experienced in this area, so I'm going to assume that her advice is correct. We might want to check in the future if there's a way that we can do this all electronically and confirm that we can enforce it, but off the top of my head, I'm going to go on with what she is.
Well, we talked about this before. I think there's a lot of things that come before us. There's minor irregularities we got to waive, and I suspect we have rules for the sake of rules, and rules because we've always done it this way, but are they really necessary? We're having trouble with bidders on projects. This one we have plenty of bidders, but other ones we haven't had that many bidders. And rejecting bids, smaller contractors are going to say, you know what, I'm busy, I got other work. I'm not going to bid you guys because you keep rejecting my bids for stupid little reason. And so I think we need to review this particular requirement, plus other ones that, do we need, all of these check boxes? Are they really necessary? Can we accept that kind? Is it enforceable? We ought to be able to answer that. And I guess our attorney for that matter is not able to answer that before we're going to make a decision on this, but in this case, this is costing us $50,000, and I don't know that we're getting the value of it. I don't feel it. I feel like we're getting the value, so it feels like a waste of our great money.
So, and to that point, we've had a conversation on this board about, the stances we take and, about character and credibility and precedent and so forth. This doesn't fall in that box for me. I agree with you. This seems like rulemaking for rulemaking's sake, and that, I'll be honest, it seems kind of absurd to me. And not to, again, just for sake of what you're saying, because we exist in absurd rule set professionally, so this is not like anything saying to you. I broadly agree with Dave's point that we should revisit, like make it simple. Don't create tripwires where they're not necessary, and make sure we understand the electronic versus physical form realities.
Yeah, and we just have to, does this have to go forward tonight, or can it wait till our next meeting, like, to go back and check it out, I mean, interrogate the attorney a little bit more, and, try to get to the bottom of our questions, can we wait, table this thing?
Yeah, totally like this thing, doing like, because we cannot really access these, tanks until we get snow melt. So, that said, I would think hard about, changing the bid requirement after the fact.
This is just put in the category of material, which is waivable.
Yeah.
So I'm not buying that it's a material thing, I guess.
Well, I think it should be, Mary Beth should confirm that it is enforceable, electronic version is enforceable.
It could become
Then
in the
probably waive the contract document requirement for it.
Okay.
So I think we can answer that question that board president is opposed, that we clarify and obviously confirm it.
You know, as we move forward, it has to be physical, and we have to have it in our hands, right? Then there's no reason to see it electronically, because we're gonna have it in our hands.
Right, and it comes in electronically as part and parcel to the entire bid package that comes electronically. This is the only piece of the bid package that comes hard, copy hand delivered. So everything else is electronic. So it's just one piece of the rest of that electronic package. So. Yes, is the short answer. We can revisit that. I also sort of to just say that we're in the middle of reviewing our entire front-end specification with the contract attorney. We did it. Now it's been 13 years ago. Was the last time we did it, and it's been kind of a process over the last year or so to get that moving forward. That this is definitely a topic on the table.
Then let's, if the board's agreeable, let's table this to the board. Do that. For sure.
So, I'll be interested to hear what you think about the next one. You wanted to take this one because it's a similar topic. Yeah.
But I support that action plan.
Should I move on to the next one? You can just start with you on that one.
Take action on the next one, though. On this one, you don't have to take action, but the next one, we do.
Unless
And we're going to table
they want to table about it.
She moved to 6B.
Yes.
Okay. Board members, I moved to 6B.
Okay, so this is for the 2023-24 tank coating touch-up project, or coating project. This project is the second biannual tank touch-up contract issued under a multi-year tank asset management program that was developed collaboratively between engineering and the pump department. Under this project, we had 4 tanks identified that would be drained, cleaned, receive spot repairs, and some partial recoating if there were larger repair areas on the interior and then also on the exterior where needed. Bids were opened on Thursday, March 23rd. We had 3 bids that were received, and the bid amounts ranged from $165,300 to $380,000. Again, there were irregularities in all 3 bids received. The apparent low bid received from R. Sutton Enterprises did not include a hard copy original bid bond at the time of bid opening. The second apparent low bid received from FAR Construction RDC did include an original hard copy bid bond. However, their bid amount was more than twice the budget available. That's kind of the gist of what's going on. We were going to propose that all bids are rejected, again, because of the irregularity of the material with the no bid bonds on the low bid. And then we were going to suggest rebidding the work. So, I'm not sure where we want to go with this.
Well, what was your budget amount for that?
The budgeted amount, was, right now we've got in the 2-year budget, $139,717.
Well, it was 165.
Correct.
So, this is the same issue. I guess if we find that that's been, if this, well, we need to find out if they submit an electronic version of it, first of all, but we also need to find out if an electronic version of the bond is unenforceable. And so, I guess we could table this one as well.
Okay.
This is the same issue.
Yes, correct.
It's getting pretty expensive, and making sure we have paper copies. It's just to get people familiar with the bid bond, like, so you get one electronically, you get one in physical form. What do you do with it? You just put it in a file. You call something like that. Is there interaction with the issuer? Like, how does it, from your perspective, how do you
Hey, I'm sorry, what? Bid bond. When we see the bid bond, what do we actually do with it? Are you making calls to the, body? We call the broker, surety, verify that it is valid.
So the
dollar amount is what we, require.
Do you do that if an electronic one is received on the low bidder, or do you not even, on the apparent low bid, if they only submit an electronic, do you follow up, or do you just call?
I do, I follow up, yeah, you do. I'm a low bid.
So for this particular one,
Actually, we don't receive a paper bid bond. I don't think I go through the motion. Just because it's so time consuming, and there's so many others to, review. And we've never, and so you've been determined the material.
For the bond itself, it's kind of locked in that they need to their approval, contact from that, kind of deal.
Yeah. To be honest, it is required, and that would be great, because you should see this person, on a bid opening, going around, because it's like, okay, we got there's 3 contractors submitting bids, and we've only got 1 paper bid bond. Where are the others, we're going, yeah, there's too many of them, so if we could avoid that, it would be great.
This company is, we start that.
Right, that they meet our AMS in rating, that they are, allowed to do business in California, because we've run up against that where they're not. So there's quite a few things that we have to run through and verify.
So generally, there's a couple things here. One, maybe tabling these 2 contracts to get clarity on whether or not an electronic is enforceable would be good, and that would be good information to then roll into redoing or re-looking at all the specs and requirements, because I've just seen now 6 bids that all have irregularities. So that's definitely saying something maybe about the process. And I don't think it's like every time it seems like there's irregularities. So let's get to the bottom of it and see what we can do to make it easier. And like President Peterson said, we want to make sure we're attracting competition, trying to get in. It's good for us. It's a worthwhile exercise. So that's what
I think that's a good goal to try to limit irregularities, but just on a broader perspective, other agencies we represent, this is not unusual for contractors. They are throwing together their bids at the last minute, and each agency's not a lot different, but a little different, and you always see them making, I hate to say it, stupid little mistakes that sometimes cost them a bit. And
Yeah, I'm not saying to get rid of the regular line. I'm just saying that may reduce that and make it more straightforward for everyone.
I just didn't want to get your hopes too high.
We need to look at that as a requirement. But, then if it's not enforceable just because it's electronic, then I see your judgment point. But if it's on time and it is enforceable, then I think it falls in the minor category that, that it would be a hard job. So that's what I'm doing.
And there's one other consideration that we take when we talk about whether it's a waiver requirement or not. It's whether it's statutory or a district requirement. And so I think we need to parse that out as well, because, we will either consider waiving the material irregularity if it's just a district requirement because we think it's in the best interest of the district to do so. So, and then, but if it's statutory, there's a lot on it. So.
That's a different category. Okay.
Okay. Well, check out on my birthday today.
My road is clean. So, right now, especially in here, they may clarify two rehabilitation projects. I think we talked about this project quite a few times. This is a rebid of a project that we did a couple of years ago in D-Scope. So, rebid, one clarifier, construction this summer. We had 3 bidders. We had 4 who showed up for the pre-bid and were interested. 3 of them submitted a bid. The one that didn't was the one who had got the bid 2 years ago. So they decided they didn't want to do it anymore. We got 3 good bids. They came pretty tight. There was the low bid was about $95,000 less, about 5% less than the other 2 bids, which was really close to each other. So it's all like we get good bids. On review of the bids, again, we've got some minor irregularities. This time, very minor, insurance broker's name versus insurance company's name on lots of lines. So we're working on cleaning up some forms, as you guys suggested, to try and not have so many of those just little minor things, but nothing major in our low bid on TNS construction on this one. We did have one copy bid bond, not three of them, but we did have, just to add to the previous discussion as an example, the second low bidder, we would have been having some fun discussions about whether their bid was valid, and the third bidder we probably would have been thrown out because they missed one of the grant forms and that's a grant required form, which we did reduce after a previous process, how many of those we require, but one of the ones that we still require because the state funding agency requires it, the third bid on this project didn't have that. So we don't need to take any action on those, and so really we're looking at get the award to be prepared a little bit. So that bid amount is $2,064,900. That does include 2 as-needed services bid items, which are $100,000 lump sum items to perform additional work. And so really the clarifier work is about $1.8 million. Anybody have any questions?
So that bid came in right about the engineer's estimate, we added 200 and a few items.
Yeah, it came in, I would say, that engineer's estimate included that 200,000, so really it came in 200,000 over, my engineer's estimate. So, some of that, you know, we kind of had some discussions, trying to figure where that's coming in. You know, getting one of these, because there's two of them together, we're losing a little economy of scale there. And then just the inflation we've seen kind of, I didn't add as much as the contract did, as far as the inflation we've seen over the last couple of years.
Board members, any questions?
Number one, find the minor regulators in the bid from TS Construction Company Incorporated to be immaterial and related to immaterial irregularities, and two, award the project to the lowest responsible bidder, TS Construction Company Incorporated, in the amount of $2,064,900.
Can I ask one question? Let's get a motion first. I'll make a motion. Discussion, you can ask. I'll make a motion.
I'll second that.
Second, any discussion?
Question, what's our experience with this contractor?
TS Construction, this was the third contract that have open for us at the moment. They are building Tahoe pump station rehabilitation, which they've been working on for the past year. They also were awarded the Upper Truckee pump station rehabilitation, which we just started submitting paperwork over the last couple of months. And then this will be our third one with them. So, relatively short history. They may have done some work for us 10 or 15 years ago. And so they're kind of, you know, coming back to Sacramento, and we're coming back. We've had really pleasurable experience with them over the last year on the job, so.
Any other discussion? Call the question. Thank you, bud. Okay, let's go to 6F, Kristen.
You really want me to? Well, I'm here about the asphalt patching contract that we do every year, and it does say rebid at the beginning of it. So, February 3rd, we went out to bid for the patches and the trench patching. And on March 1st, we received two bids, and the low bid was deemed non-responsive, and the amount ranged anywhere from $486,000 to $822,000. So we thought it would be better to go back out to bid and see what happened. So, on March 10th, we went back out to bid, and on March 28th, we received three bids, and they were open, and they ranged anywhere from $469,000 to $739,000. So there was some irregularities in this last bid, and the first bid, wasn't the bond the first bid, it was,
No, the low bid was not, registered with the Department of Industrial Relations, which is legally required that they be before submitting a bid.
yes. And, the lowest bid was GD General Engineering, and that was the $469,540. There was some minor irregularities, but nothing like you guys have been talking about as far as bonds and stuff. So, at this point, we're asking if you guys would approve the lowest bid on the second go-round. Is there any questions?
No questions.
Can I read real quick?
It sounds like this is a unit price contract, quantities vary, so the lump sum really isn't the number in the end.
It's not like the major ones that they were talking about. But I will give you a heads up. These prices are based off of our past patches, what we anticipate coming in every year, kind of an average of what we do every year. But because of this snowpack and this storms this winter, I have a feeling that we're going back to see it again. There was no way for us to estimate what kind of damage is out there, but I'll give you an example. 2 days ago on Apache Avenue, up above the post office, we had done a leak there, I don't know, a couple months ago. And the grader was out Sunday and Monday morning doing the snow plowing, and the grader sank in a hole. Didn't hurt the grader, didn't hurt the operator, but the road gave way. So long story short, where we did the leak, the leak was on top of the hill. 200 feet down is where the water was coming out of the asphalt on a fairly new paved road. So, yeah, you know where I'm going. And we have, it undermined down the road. We've got, the guys went in and jackhammered out, and there's holes in the middle of the road on this side. So, long story short, right off the top, we're gonna have to probably repave a 200-foot section of road. That's just what we know about. You guys have seen the patches around town, the roads around town. We're still responsible for some, for quite a few. So I just want to be clear and make sure you guys know everything and where I'm coming from. That because of this winter, we may be coming back to see you again for probably more months.
On that particular leak, I think thanks for coming back, that leak was on the service side of the main.
Yes.
You were talking earlier in the budget meeting, pipe was fine, but the failure was on the service side of the water main, not the customer side, but our side, the portion between the main and the property line, essentially. So we've got a lot of those problems that are starting to come forward as well. Yes.
And in the bid analysis on, looks like page 55. And I found it, the second one there, teach level.
Yes.
And then the very close, that, basically the same bid, but, teach level is cheaper on city asphalt patches and other costs related to city and county patches. And Pioneer Coal Creek, so they're basically lower on those three categories, but they were a little higher on county asphalt patches. So, how do you estimate, is there going to be more county asphalt patches or more city asphalt?
That's hard to narrow down, but right off the top of my head, I think we do more city work than county, but then again, the county roads are, I would say, in worse shape than the city roads, so that's kind of hard to balance out, just guessing. I'm kind of hoping it'd be in the city because it costs us less to pave than it does in the county because of the amount of asphalt we have to use. But it's pretty hard to answer. Everything's still kind of covered.
Yeah, it's just, GB is a little bit just by virtue of the guesstimate of,
Yes.
how many are going to be in one place versus the other, and
Yes.
otherwise they're pretty much the same bid, 469.5 versus 472.8.
Yeah.
And I can say right now that we have been doing a few more repairs on patches that were already done in the city, I think, than we have in the county. The county, we just have bigger ones, but it seems like we have a few more in the city that are bad compared to the county at this point.
So let me ask this, could you award contracts for both firms and give the county work to one and the city work to the other?
This package was not set up that way.
Yeah.
No, not that I'm aware of.
No, the way it was written.
The way it was written, it was one contractor for both. Now, if that's something you want to look at in the future, where you go to two different bids, one for county, one for city, I think that's possible.
That's definitely possible, but not the way this was set.
Yes.
GD General Engineering, do I have a history with them, and are they able to release?
Oh, yeah. It's actually sitting right here. I've known them from working here, 33 years. I know you were working for the district prior to that. Engineering, I think, has worked for them. A lot of changes, a lot of other people have gone. But I'm just, very reliable, very good.
The last of my family up here was my father working as a superintendent in 1958, installing the sewer mains on the state streets. And then we moved here in 61. As far as a kid, I worked on installing sewer mains up by Heavenly and Christmas Valley. It just goes on and on.
Been around for a long time with the district. Requested board action, number 1, find minor irregularities in the bid from GB General Engineering Contractor Incorporated to be immaterial and waive immaterial irregularities. And 2, award the project to the lowest responsible bidder, GB General Engineering Contractor Incorporated, in the amount of $469,540. I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Second. Any discussion? We'll just ask this, because of the way it's worded, this is not a lump sum, so we're not awarding it in the amount of $469. That's not a bid, that's not a lump sum. So it's kind of a not to exceed, isn't it?
I would think so, right? Not to exceed, because I just said it was based off averages.
I'm not clear enough that we're not obligated by the church.
Well, could we add the last paragraph on the agenda item to the requested board action and call it good? It says total bid values are estimates based upon bid prices multiplied by the estimated number of patches of various sizes plus related work. The estimated factors are based upon historical data, blah, blah. Although the actual quantities and total may vary, but bid prices will remain firm. Maybe just the last sentence. I don't think it's not to exceed. If you do a balancing deductive change order at the end, which you do, so you're approving it in this amount now, and if we don't use it all, then we come back to you for a deductive change order to make the account balance at the end. And if we say, and if it looks like we're going over, we come for approval to increase, change order.
Yeah, I think that's right, because, you're saying this is the amount you believe it's gonna be right now, but depending whether it's over or under the actual work, then staff will come back to the district, or the district's board for approval to either for a deduct or an add. Very good. Would it make it clear if it might exceed? Or, I think it's estimated or something? I think it's fine the way it is, and that way you've got a firm number to deal with, and then you just either add or deduct depending on what the actual, quantity of work was.
Okay. That's a good question. You had me wondering too.
Any other discussion? Call the question.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. All right, let's go to, 7, Sam and Committee liaison report. Let's start it. Okay.
Yeah, I don't really have a report right now. Our El Dorado County liaison role is still there, and I think things are still progressing with Supervisor Lane. So I will leave it at that. Pretty good. And I don't have any committee reports. El Dorado Water Agency meets on the 12th, and actually we have a county-wide plenary down in El Dorado Hills on the 13th for El Dorado Water Agency. So 2 days in a row. Come on.
All right, we had a System Efficiency and Sustainability Committee meeting on the 28th. Ross, Shelley, Julie were all in attendance, including Nick. Anyways, we talked through kind of the climate adaptation and keeping net zero project with Iowa Utilities update. And basically, sounds like lots on top of that has been engaged on various workshops and, working through, meetings, and you can speak with anything you like, but, some of, like, I think there's a lot of interest in understanding what the grants are available as it relates to developing, indicators, metrics.
Yeah, definitely starting a program for our district and kind of best practices on how to monitor our emissions and be climate resilient. And it's going to have various amount of workshops throughout the year, and they're going to be focused on engineering, CIP, grants that are available to help combat that, and just other workshops that are surrounded by this climate resilience and action plan.
And we had a small conversation around the memorandum of understanding for the Tahoe Zero Emissions District. Largely, I think we got have ourselves on speed in terms of moving that through. And so, Shelley, do you want to comment on that in terms of kind of where we are with moving that forward?
We have a FP-SET meeting next week, this week or the week after, and it's an agenda item to discuss.
And then we had an update from Julie on the solar project, and looks like we're moving forward with Rob Ruick we've secured as a consultant, and we've developed the interconnection agreement with Liberty Utilities at $20,000. Somewhere around there, is that right?
On the, developers, tab. It'll be on the third
It'll be on there, it'll be on the developers tab. We went through a number of different grants, kind of the status of various grants. We talked a little bit about that as part of our budget conversation earlier on today, so I'm going to go through that again.
Yeah, I think you did. I mean, we personally, not to be redundant, that Shane said, the solar project moving forward and actually having data in the horizon that we could look into government to work through the day. Nick Haven, put in a lovely word for us through that process. But no, it was really positive meeting, and great progress we've made on things we've been working on for a while.
I guess the one other thing is the city moving forward with posting an RFP for evaluating municipal power. So, we're giving you a handshake.
We met with the city following that meeting, and there aren't currently plans for posting an RFP, but we'll give you an update at the next meeting.
That's what I have to note here.
Yeah, I guess just jumping in that, I was on that call on Monday, kind of the city liaison role, and, the Shelley comment is, as you get into things, you're learning the pieces, right? So it's just kind of an iterative process. But they thought the collaboration was great. The sentiment about partners is just both in terms of kind of our need, but in terms of reliability, being able to continue to pump water and so forth, and how that aligns with the city's goals and looking to address kind of our power issues in conjunction with what local business owners are dealing with, and the intermittency of when power is cut and when it's not. So I guess that was a really positive first step. But anything like this is going to be a long road.
For future agendas, can we just eliminate item 9 and have that being included with item 7? Because it really is a liaison function for me, and I just report under item 7 every time. I think I just cut that out. Okay, any board member reports?
Gonna be out of town this week. You guys leave it?
Where you go?
To Kauai. So we're calling our manager.
Okay, let's go to item 10A, staff attorney reports. Second last week.
Good afternoon.
Ross Cole, Asset Management Analyst. This presentation is to give you an overview of the district's gravity mainline condition assessment program and provide the annual update on what came out of the analysis on the latest round of data collection. So I will not be asking for any money today. So I'll start with some general facts about our collection system and the goals we've set for our CCTV assessment program. We have a total of 312 miles of sewer main line, which adds up to around 1.65 million linear feet of pipe. The vast majority of that collection system is composed of asbestos cement, about 80%, and clay pipe, about 10%. We have 330 pipes on the enhanced cleaning list. These pipes all have known issues and are cleaned on a much more frequent schedule than most of the system, with the worst of them being cleaned eventually. In 2018, we set a goal of inspecting 10% of our collection system per year and inspecting the entire system every 10 years. Our underground repair sewer crew typically perform an inspection 5 days a week. Oops, sorry.
Real quick. We don't have any way to, launch this thing into the porch main.
We do. We have some, and I'll touch on that at the end of the presentation, but we do have some inspection ports set up on 3, I believe, of our porch mains. And then we just actually had a meeting on this yesterday to discuss our next plan to inspect the sea line. And then we'll also be doing, I believe it was kind of the consensus at that meeting was the upper Truckee sewer force main. And then we would be addressing,
And we also have on our, near-term construction plan to put ports on, the Bijou 12 force main from Johnson to Place Upstream Plant. So we're chipping away at getting that.
Yeah, I just saw a graph of that. I'd ask a question. Go ahead.
So all of our inspections are coded according to the industry standard PACP, which is Pipeline Assessment Certification Program, which ensures that the defects are coded consistently and allows us to perform some pretty in-depth analysis on the kind of defects we're seeing in the pipes. Our entire sewer crew is trained and certified in that PACP standard, so it kind of keeps that general understanding of the code that we see. We currently use the large CCTV truck, and then we do have a portable camera for tough to get access easements. So here's a look at the history of our inspection progress since we set our goal in 2018. You can see that back in 2018, we almost doubled that goal. That's because there was a big push that year to collect as much data as we could to support the 218 process. In 2019, we didn't quite meet our goal, but we came close at 129,000, so that's awesome. But in 2020, we saw a slight dip at 81,000. This was due to COVID, and then we split shifts, and then we kind of changed directions, and we focused just on hydro cleaning our system. In 2021, we also fell a little short as well. We had trouble with our camera truck in that inspection time, and given that we have that short window in the summer to really, go through the system and CCTV with big season and the roads being clear, we suffered on that. But you can see in 2022, we actually exceeded our goal and some change. So that's good. And as it stands right now, we're about 48% of our system has been inspected, so that's great. So that big push in 2018 really gave us a buffer. So the analysis that I used for all the data that we collected in our CCTV program, point defects, those are typically holes, fractures, surface damage. We typically handle those with a spot repair. Root defect, that's pretty self-explanatory, but what we do use, and it's very effective, is an EPA-approved chemical that we use that's root herbicide. And also, if we can't do it that way, we can do a spot repair, but that's to prevent further root intrusion. Continuous defects, this is kind of generally described as like you see one defect and it goes for multiple feet. So that's multiple fractures, extended surface damage. And we use full CIPP lining. CIPP lining is like cured in place pipe, just in case you know that. And then we have sag defects, so that's typically observed by when the camera goes underwater. And we go, oh, yeah, there must be a sag, water's collecting there, unless there's like a significant blockage. But, so change in water level, and that's the repair method, unfortunately, will be replacement on that. So when we take all this data and we extrapolate this over our entire system, for point defects, the expected prevalence of point defects is about 22% of the pipes. And then for root defects, about 12% of those pipes. Continuous defects, 0.6% of those pipes. Sags and other defects, about 2.2. And for the sags and other defects, the reason why I put it in like an open trench replacement repair method is like sags aren't necessarily emergency situations. We can deal with it, but if we observe something in that sag that gives it reason to go in there, then we'll do an open trench replacement. So we use this data and the extrapolation to kind of forecast and anticipate what we're going to be having to spend on our system. So as you can see, $630 per linear foot of open trench construction, and then $180 per linear foot to cast in place pipes. So open trench can be very expensive, as you can see. Yes, of course.
I'm surprised by the linear footage of sags. Just comparison, our water line replacement, we're talking about 15,000 feet a year, which is pretty aggressive. There's 39,000 feet of sags in our sewers. That's a lot. And many years worth of work to get that done. Yeah,
so extrapolated, right? Extrapolated. Yes, this is what we're expecting based on extrapolation. And unfortunately, it's based off our sample size, right? So this next slide will kind of show you that as we see here in this, over our years as we progress through this program here, you can see that it started at 3% in 2018. And now we're kind of tapering off and plateauing as we increase our sample size. So that's great. That's a kind of a silver lining to that. I don't expect it to go to zero, but maybe a plateau, if you will. That's the problem with extrapolating data. You don't really know the whole picture. So that's why I'm anticipating it, over the next 5 years, when we see the whole system, we can really get a look at it.
We're pretty good. I mean, we're doing almost half of our system. So it's a pretty solid number. But again, it's an emergency, like, years replacement projects. It's more like maintenance headaches.
Correct, yeah. And I guess I should have stated a little bit with this other defect. This other defect could be a point defect. It could be insignificant, but if it's like a crack or a fracture or something that's looking like it's going to start failing, then we'll go into an open trench replacement. So, yeah, I'm sorry to mislead you on that. So, yeah, as you can see here, we started off with 22%, and then as we just keep getting more and more data coming in, it's starting to taper off to the 20% mark in 2022. Percent of pipes with continuous started at 1.2, and now we're down to 1.6, and then with the 3% into 2.2.
So Ross, I feel like there's one point of caution here, is that, when we started in 2018 and 19, we really tried to get a representative view of the whole system. And so we really looked for those places that are in hard to reach, potentially more likely to have defect areas. And so we saw those in that first push, but in the next couple of years, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we really got back out to the meadows much, because we kind of we got the low-hanging fruit that first year. And so when we get towards the end of the 10-year cycle, probably what's going to be left are going to be some of the hardest to reach pipes with some of the biggest consequences of failure, and actually more likely to have some failures. So we might then, at kind of like the end of that, see a spike again in kind of like once we have the whole picture.
Right.
You did a really good job of anticipating my question. Your sample design. So yeah, so it sounds to me like much of the work is more easily accessed, or not really getting into those harder to reach meta systems. Or
more of what we're doing right now. Yeah. Trying to get, across the whole system.
A big grab. We try to target some areas for CIP and things like that, but they kind of drive that program too, of like where we want to go and where they want to grab that, increase the sample size. So next year, depending on where they go, that can change, that can skew it.
Is that going to affect our goal? I mean, we still be able to achieve that if we start getting into target places?
So it will, if we see sort of a rebound back towards those 18, 19 numbers towards the end, but, we have some access problems that we have to address before we can actually get into those places, so.
Anything more, Stan? So moving forward, we do plan on inspecting the remaining UC pipes on our list. An issue with these pipes being in the meadows too is when you can easily clean them, because to camera them, you have to suck them out first and then send the camera in while it's sucking to keep it clean. So it's a particular big challenge, and especially in a manhole sitting in the middle of Lake Christopher, it's really tough to get there. So that's why they kind of are taking a long time to get to. So we had a meeting yesterday about that with Chris Stanton, and he did mention we're going to try to come up with a game plan of like bringing our tool pad out there and utilizing our portable evening camera. And I was brainstorming on my drive home, maybe getting some, they make swamp mats so they can get trucks out on it, whatever we can do to do that in the interim. But we do have sewer system access improvement project on our CIP program for 2026. So hopefully we can address a lot of these issues and be more proactive about these hard to reach areas. We have inspected 254 out of the 330 AC pipes and have about 76 left to inspect. We've been prioritizing our AC pipes and inspected 58 additional pipes in 2021, but many of these pipes are in the most difficult access areas. So we are continuing to refine our future inspection priorities. We continue working with local partners to inspect other construction projects, big paving projects. We try to get before that, be ahead of them. We obviously want to, as we've seen in the last month with our I&I, we're going to focus on inspections in the areas with known I&I problems. And then go back to Mr. Peterson's comment about force mains. So we have, what's that? There's approximately 19 miles of force main. Most of it has been continuing in service and has not been inspected. So we are working on determining the best ways to perform condition assessments on these pipes. And then Chris Stanley also mentioned that little ball, to kind of go deeper in that, it's a ball that you set at an inspection port and you send it with a flow, and it'll take various readings of the pipe thickness and the C factor of it, and gather a bunch of data that will be potentially very useful for those hard to reach areas. I believe it can fit into the size of like a 2-inch inspection port. So that should be very helpful for us in developing this program. And like I said, we're going to be doing export line, the sea export line in October, and upper truck and sewer. And then base form, has it been a month already since I talked to you guys about water? Well, we use base form for our water model and anticipating analysis of our water leaks. in our system, so we actually started incorporating the sewer side to that. So I'm hoping, by my next report with you guys next year, I can maybe bring that into play, and we can kind of play with some of the data from that, more of like a live demo, so we can kind of get out of our world and see some exciting things. So I'm hoping for that, and that'd be great. So, with that being said, I'd like to open it up to questions. And, maybe, some suggestions of what you guys might want to see on the next one. Something to dig a little deeper if you want.
I guess next time you could clarify that 39,000 feet, because I just did a quick calculation, it's $630 a foot, that's about 25 million, I don't know what that's in our sewer at this point.
Yeah, and we're using, there are sites all over our system and we manage them, but when we see sites, like concentrated in an area like we did on Apache Avenue by the elementary school, that elevated itself to the point of replacement, because it was also accompanied by these defects that gave us concern that we could either be taking more on or letting water out of our system. So, anyway, it's an indicator. We're seeing these signs, and it can speak to some of the original construction methods that may have been used, or the difficult environment in which they were installed, and so we'll continue to monitor them.
Since we're going to be looking at a new Prop 218 process here, we got about a year to gin up the numbers, to make sure, whatever number, that's the biggest one in this seal here, so, that's the important one, we need to get into the seal.
And these are the numbers that we are using to make our request every year on our senior plan. So the numbers that are coming out of the current CCTV program that are funding the annual request. So, we'll see if there's any targeted CCTV we want them to do this year in order to protect those numbers. I don't expect to see a huge change in our budget request for gravity sewer for the Prop 218.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's go to the June report.
Okay, starting with staffing, new hires since the last meeting, there's plenty of job opportunities in engineering. We're advertising for engineering inspectors, that closes April 23rd. In finance for grants specialists, and also closes on April 23rd. We've got a lot of temporary and seasonal positions open right now. Under water and sewer, customer service inspections, customer service representative, finance office assistant, and engineering intern. And coming soon, open positions in pumps and underground repair sewer. So we're continuing historic run of job opportunities at the district, and if you know someone that wants to work at the district, let them know now's the time to take a look. I know the PTC a couple of weeks ago, Jason Waxworth, the executive director, and Jane Freeman, as the deputy director. We talked a lot about our coordination with the memo at Bellevue, and I thank them for their collaboration. And really, we've worked well in the past in that same little area. We had an adaptive management program in place for 5 years, up to maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So I just talked to them, and they talked to me about we're going to work together to continue to look for better solutions in that meadow. Also, just on trying to explain our system, the challenges that we're having, especially with I&I, how I&I happens, how it causes us to, put us at risk of a sewer spill, the cost, and the energy policy, the concrete, export all that extra flow. So we really appreciated that information. Also mentioned that there are a lot of urban lots, over 2,500 urban lots that they've purchased over the years. And most of those lots have a sewer lateral attached to them, sources of I&I. So we've worked with the CDC probably at least for the past 10 years they participated in our program to seal on the inside, maybe 10 to 15 of the sewer levels per year when we're doing our own spot repair projects. But we have 2,500 out there to do, and we've been done a lot faster. Really, the best way to do this is not to seal them from the inside. That might last 20 years, I don't know, but a permanent solution is to excavate over the sewer and permanently abandon that lateral from the outside. So, stay with the winners and that. We have some funding ideas to accomplish that. If you're working with engineers to develop a multi-year plan for both the CEC and the Forest Service to try to tackle these abandoned sewer lateral projects. So more to come on that for sure. On my list, but Sean and I met our new state senator, Roy Alvarado Gill, on Monday at the brewery. So it's great to catch up with her. And she wants to talk to her, thank her for her support for state funding for water infrastructure for fire suppression. And she offered a bill, SB 470, that speaks directly to that. So we're hoping that opens up more funding for us in the future. And last item is the RFP for legal services. Paul.
Sure. So if you remember, we posted an RFP for legal services, general counsel services, and we did that on March 6th. It's due tomorrow on the 7th of April. We posted it on Planet Bids, Aqua's RFP portal, as well as CSDA's RFP portal. Melanie is the repository for any proposals coming in.
Make it sound so good.
As well as questions and comments. As of today, we've actually only received 2 proposals.
And we actually have one more during this board meeting.
Okay, so 3. We're assuming that some more will come in before they're due tomorrow. We did have 2 contact us, 2 potential proposers contact us and tell us why they didn't propose. They both said they would have liked to, but one just said he didn't have the capacity to take on another client. And the other one said they would have proposed if it was for all legal services and not just general counsel services. So obviously, tomorrow we'll evaluate what we got. We'll take a look at them. We'll get together with the committee, determine if the proposals are adequate to move forward or to potentially revise the RFP and put it out there again. I know there were some concerns that possibly the RFP was too broad in nature, since we were kind of looking for general counsel services only, and then we'd farm out kind of special projects. So yeah, we'll have to see what we get.
Thanks, all. That's all for me too.
Any questions? Okay. We had past and future meetings noted under item 12, that there are a couple that are not shown. On school 13, Colorado Water Agency, 100. And I think John and I are going at the minimum, what we should understand.
Possibly Paul, showing some interest. Come on. At least they want
Richie, check at 9 a.m. on Colorado.
Usually 9 to 12, 9 to 1, but yeah.
I mean, it's a little early. And then the other is tomorrow, actually, there's a Aqua Headwaters group conference call that I'm on. SB 470 is one of the programs. What on that?
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody else seen anything that isn't on there. I think there's one meeting that related to closed session, so I'll talk about that. Other than that, let's go to closed session. Nothing to report out. We're not.